Truthfully, Peter, this is a decision for the New Zealand people and the New Zealand government. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment, but obviously we're all adjusting in the circumstances, and the logic that is outlined by the Prime Minister makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, we've got elections coming up. We've got the Queensland, Northern Territory election, WA election. I mean, is this something that should? I mean, NT is probably too close, but for the other ones, is that could a delay be on?
Well, again, it's up for each of the people in those states and their governments. But democracy shouldn't be suspended because of the pandemic. It's merely about what measures you need to take that's appropriate to assist people in having their voice and their say. Because at this critical time, making sure we have accountable governments for the people is more critical than ever.
On to matters closer to where you are now in Victoria. The criticism, I suppose, or the questions is probably a better word. Questions are being asked now about when to reopen borders now that the numbers appear to be stabilising in Victoria. What would your time frame be when you'd possibly start looking at that?
I don't actually have a time frame because a couple of days does not make a trend, and that might sound self-evident, but I think we need to be confident that numbers are coming down considerably before offering strong opinions one way or the other. The last time when there was discussion around borders after the first wave, or after the first lockdown, I should say more correctly, the numbers are clearly stabilised and were going down and or nearly didn't exist. And there was a case about, or question about what the merit of having closed borders are. I can understand why other states want to have closed borders. Obviously, I'd like to see them opened up. I think the whole of Australia would like to see them opened up, but it needs to be proportionate to the risk.
On to economic matters. Tim, Wesfarmers chief Rob Scott, he's called for a 20% investment allowance in today's Australian newspaper. Wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, you should read my new book, The New Social Contract, which goes through the case about why we should have a discussion on tax reform. He's doing it for business reasons. I'm doing it for intergenerational reasons, but we both basically come up with similar conclusions. And so I think when we're coming out of this period, what's going to be clear is economic growth is going to be critical, particularly for those most impacted by this crisis, and it's going to be younger Australians. And the way we do that is making Australia as attractive a destination to invest so we can create jobs and opportunity. Now, the specifics and the detail about how you get there, we can have a long esoteric discussion, but the thrust and the focus, and that we have business leaders talking about why it's important to create jobs for young Australians is essential at this time. We need business leadership to be part of this conversation to persuade the public about why the status quo simply isn't sustainable.
OK, well, there's 3 points that he makes this morning. We don't need to go into too much detail, but just give me your quick response to them. So, first of all, the 20% investment allowance. That's something you agree with?
I'm very open to it.
OK. All right. GST changes.
Well, I've been very open to it. I've always been very open to GST changes.
OK, and payroll tax. I mean, Donald Trump wants to kill this off if he's re-elected next year over in the United States. Is that something? I mean, Dominic Perrottet and the Victorian Treasurer also sort of looking at doing something similar. What's your view on that?
Well, it requires the states to take leadership in their own realm. Tax reform isn't the states abolishing their own taxes and then just giving more tax responsibility to the Commonwealth. It's about states raising the revenue that they spend. So I'm quite happy if the states want to have that conversation about abolishing payroll tax or reducing payroll tax, but then they've got to articulate how it is they're going to raise the revenue and take responsibility for the gap.
On to super. Some lobby groups have accused some backbenchers, and I'm presuming that you're being targeted here, Tim, of undermining the super rate rise and verballing the RBA, even manipulating some of Dr Lowe's data. What's your reaction to that?
Well, their industry, Super Australia, goes again. It used to be said that, you don't want to get in between a state premier and a bag of taxpayers' cash. These days, you don't want to be somebody who gets in between industry super fund managers and Australians' hard work and savings. And, they can claim all these things all they want. You go and read the transcript, it's quite clear. The RBA governor at the hearing I chaired last Friday explicitly said that if you increase super guarantee, it will impact wages and it will have a correlation with jobs growth, and the critical focus now coming out of COVID-19 must be jobs growth.
It seems like the Prime Minister's language is shifting a little bit when it comes to, this scheduled super rise. Do you think it's going to happen?
I think we've got it legislated, it's clearly legislated. The government hasn't changed its position, but what some of us are doing is looking at the evidence base that exists to make sure that we make informed decisions as a government in changing circumstances. The RBA Governor, ACOS, the Grattan Institute, Industry Super Australia's own research shows that it comes at the expense of wages. And of course, what we want as a government, I would have thought, is to promote jobs growth at this critical time so that every Australian can have employment and a super balance at retirement.
Well, I mean, it's a significant event that's taken place since this legislation was put forth and passed. I mean, can you go back on that, though, given that, it was such a huge event, COVID-19 being the point of contention here?
Well, this is precisely why it's good to look at the evidence, and what's been clearly outlined by the evidence nearly across the board, to be frank, is that if we increase the compulsory super guarantee, it will come at the expense of wage growth, and there's a correlation then obviously with employment growth as well. So these sorts of things need to be looked at based on the evidence, and the evidence is becoming very clear.